for watching and listening to my stories.
Remember to like, share, and subscribe to Voice of Grandma.
The way my son looked at me, it wasn't with the love I'd known for 30 years. It was a cold, deep disappointment. Right there, in front of our whole family, my daughter-in-law, Clara, had just accused me of being a thief, and the evidence she'd planted looked very real. In that one moment, with everyone staring at me, I wasn't a mother or a grandmother anymore. I was a criminal in my own home. Clara, with tears rolling down her cheeks, played the part of the heartbroken victim so perfectly. It was like she erased 30 years of my life, of my love, of who I was. But what they all thought was surrender, the quiet shame of a guilty woman, was something else entirely. They had just lit a fire in me, and they had no idea it was about to burn their whole world down. Before Clara, my life was simple, but so full. My greatest pride was my son, David. I raised him by myself after his father passed away far too young, and I poured every bit of myself into making sure he had all the chances I never did. And he took every single one. He built a tech empire from nothing, and his name became known for success. He was a millionaire many times over, but to me, he was still just my boy. The same boy who'd scraped his knee in the park, the one I'd taught to ride a bike. Our bond was the rock of my world. We didn't have to talk all the time, but when we did, it mattered. He'd call me after a big deal closed, not to brag, but just to share that quiet feeling of accomplishment, and my heart would just swell with pride. Then, David brought Clara home. At first, I saw what he saw. She was beautiful, charming, and smart. She laughed at all his jokes and looked at him with a kind of adoration that reminded me of my own. I thought, finally, my son has found someone to share his wonderful life with. I opened my heart to her, I really did. I wanted the kind of relationship with a daughter-in-law that you dream of. I taught her my husband's favorite recipes and shared old stories about David's childhood. But after a while, I started to notice little things. Tiny remarks that just didn't sit right. It started with subtle digs, always wrapped up in fake concern. We'd be at one of David's fancy charity parties, and she'd lean in and whisper, "This must all be so overwhelming for you, Helen. You're used to a much simpler life." It wasn't a question, it was her drawing a line between her world and mine. Once, at their huge house for dinner, she complimented the roast chicken I'd brought, a recipe David's loved since he was a boy. "It's so rustic, Helen," she said with a sweet smile. "It reminds me of a time before David had to worry about things like cholesterol." The meaning was clear. I was a relic from a past he'd outgrown. David, completely smitten and always busy, never seemed to pick up on it. He'd just smile and squeeze her hand, seeing the supportive wife he thought she was. I tried to tell myself I was just being a sensitive mother, afraid of being replaced. I tried even harder to connect with her, but it was like hugging a marble statue. She was perfect on the outside, but cold and hard underneath. The more I tried, the more she seemed to resent me, my history, and my bond with my own son. One evening, about a year after they were married, David gave me a beautiful leather box. Inside was his father's vintage watch. It was the only thing of real monetary value I had left from my husband, but you couldn't put a price on what it meant to me. "I want you to hold on to this for me, Mom," David said. "I want to give it to my own son one day. It feels safest with you." Tears sprang to my eyes. It was a gesture of such deep trust, a reminder of our bond that Clara could never touch. I kept it in my safe, a tangible link to my past and a promise for our family's future. It was around then that David brought up an allowance. We were having a rare lunch, just the two of us. "Mom, you've done so much for me," he started, a little awkwardly. "I want to make sure you're taken care of." He told me he was having his company set up a monthly payment for me. A generous one. $5,000 a month. I was stunned. I didn't need the money, but the thought behind it moved me to my core. Clara will handle the details, he added, waving his hand as if it was nothing. She's brilliant with finances. It's just easier for her to manage. A little flicker of unease went through me. Why put a middleman in what should be so simple? But I pushed the feeling down. I didn't want to seem ungrateful or paranoid. So I just nodded and thanked my sweet, generous boy, telling myself this was just how things were now. Now we will talk about the performance of a lifetime. The stage for my public humiliation was set on David's 31st birthday. They were hosting a big dinner party at their estate, the house buzzing with conversations and the clinking of champagne glasses. The whole family was there. I decided it was the perfect night to finally give David his father's watch. He was a man now, a husband. It just felt right. Earlier that day, I'd brought the velvet box to the house and put it on the desk in David's private study for safekeeping. I planned to give it to him after dinner. The evening went on, and Clara played the perfect hostess, gliding around the room. She made a point to come over, placing a cool hand on my arm. "Helen, you look wonderful," she said, her eyes scanning my simple dress. "I'm so glad you came." The unspoken part hung in the air. "I'm surprised you know how to fit in." After the main course, Clara stood up, a look of fake panic on her face. "Everyone," she began, her voice trembling just enough. "This is so embarrassing, but David's gift, it seems to be missing." David looked at her, confused. "What are you talking about? The watch?" "Yes," she said, her eyes filling with crocodile tears. "The one from your father. I went to get it from the study, and it's gone." The room went quiet. "Clara, I put it on the desk myself this afternoon," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you sure you looked properly?" "Of course, I looked properly, Helen," she snapped, before softening her tone for the guests. "I've looked everywhere." She started wringing her hands. "I hate to even think this, but it was a very valuable watch. Maybe we should just make sure no one accidentally picked it up." The suggestion was awful, but she said it so delicately. Then, with an air of great reluctance, she suggested they check people's handbags. "It's a terrible thing to ask," she whispered, "but I can't bear the thought of it being stolen." A few guests opened their purses. It was all a show, and Clara was the director. When she got to me, her eyes were full of a pity that made my skin crawl. "Helen, I'm so sorry to even ask." "Of course," I said, my heart pounding. I knew, with a sickening feeling, what was coming. I handed her my handbag. She opened it, dug around for a moment, and then her hand froze. Her eyes went wide. Slowly, she pulled out the velvet box. A gasp went through the room. It was the sound of my character, my very identity, being shattered. Silence. Then Clara spoke, her voice breaking with fake disbelief. "Helen, how could you?" "Why?" I couldn't speak. I just looked at the box, and then at my son. I looked to David, my anchor, expecting him to laugh it all off. But he didn't. He looked from the watch to me, and the warmth I had always seen in his eyes was just gone. Replaced by ice. "Mom," he said, his voice quiet but sharp. "Why?" It was Clara who answered for me, stepping in for the final blow. She put a hand on David's arm. "David, don't be too hard on her," she cooed. "If you needed money, Helen, you could have just asked. David gives you that generous allowance every single month. You didn't have to do this." And there it was. The motive. In the eyes of everyone there, I was no longer just a thief, I was a greedy, ungrateful old woman. I looked around at my family. My cousins, my nieces. No one would meet my eye. In that single moment, I became a ghost. I whispered, but no one was listening. David, his face a mask, walked over to me. "I think it's best if you leave, Mom," he said, his voice completely empty. Leave. He was casting me out. His own mother. Based on a lie so cruel it took my breath away. I looked at Clara, who stood beside him, her face a perfect picture of sorrow. I did the only thing I could do. I turned, and I walked away. That long walk out of their house was the longest of my life. I wasn't just leaving a party. I felt like I was leaving my life behind. Now the time is the forging of a resolve. The days that followed were just a blur of gray. The world seemed to have lost its color. I didn't answer the phone, I didn't eat. I just sat in the armchair my late husband always loved, replaying that night over and over. The gasp. The silence. The coldness in my son's eyes. The humiliation was a physical thing, a heavy cloak I couldn't take off. I cried until I felt empty. The loneliness of being unjustly accused is a terrible thing. My own family had condemned me without a single question, choosing to believe a woman they'd known for 2 years over a lifetime with me. The betrayal from my son was the deepest cut. He was my life's work. And he thought I was a thief. On the 4th day, I was staring at a photo on the mantelpiece of me and my husband. He had this look on his face, a look of such pride and belief in me. He always saw my strength, even when I felt weak. Looking at his smiling face, something inside me shifted. The grief started to harden into something else. It was anger. A cold, quiet anger. I would not let her do this. I would not let this woman destroy my life and my family. I decided right then that I would not be a victim. I would fight. Not by screaming or crying, that's what she wanted. It would only make me look guiltier. No, I would fight with my mind, my patience, and the truth. What they had mistaken for surrender would be the quiet beginning of my war. A strange calm settled over me. I started to think, picking apart Clara's plan. The theft was dramatic, but it was sloppy. The real key was what she said about the allowance. David gives you that generous allowance every single month. That was what made her story believable. And that, I realized, was where I'd find the first crack. That's where I would start pulling the thread that would unravel everything. Let's talk about weaving the net. My first stop was the bank. For 2 years, I'd trusted that the promised allowance was being handled. Now that trust felt foolish. I sat down with a kind bank manager and asked for a complete printout of my account for the past 24 months. I spread the papers out on the table and scanned them, line by line. I looked for a deposit of $5,000. Any recurring deposit at all. Nothing. There was not a single payment. For 2 years, the money David thought he was giving me, the money Clara had used to paint me as greedy, had never once reached my account. I carefully put the statements in my folder. It was just paper, but it felt as solid as a rock. So, where was the money going? David had said his company's finance department handled it. I remembered his CFO, a sharp woman named Sarah. Making that call was humiliating. My resolve wavered for a second, but then I pictured Clara's smug smile, and my spine straightened. I dialed her number and kept my voice calm. "Sarah, it's Helen, David's mother," I began. I seemed to have misplaced some paperwork. David set up a monthly payment for me some time ago, and I just need to confirm the account numbers from my records. There was a pause. "Of course, Helen. Let me pull up the file," she said. I heard her typing. "Okay, I have it." The automatic transfer of $5,000 is sent on the 1st of every month to a savings account under the name H. Miller. My breath caught. And the account number? I asked, reading her my account number from the statements. No, Sarah said slowly, her voice now laced with confusion. That's not the number I have here. The one on this authorization form is completely different. An authorization form. Sarah, I said, deciding to trust her. I have my bank statements in front of me. That money has never been deposited into my account. The silence on the line was heavy. Helen, she said, her voice dropping. The authorization form for this transfer has your signature on it. It was submitted by Clara 2 years ago. She said she was helping you manage your finances. A forged signature. Clara had opened another account in my name and had been siphoning my son's money into it for 2 years. $120,000. The nerve. Sarah, I never signed that form, I said. I need copies of those records. All of them. Can you get them for me, discreetly? I'll have a courier send them to you this afternoon, she replied. Now I had the financial proof. But how could I prove she planted the watch? I needed to show what kind of person she was. This led me to the most unpleasant step of all. I bought a tiny camera, disguised as a phone charger. Holding it in my hand made me feel sick. I was stooping to her level. The problem was planting it. David had cut me off. Then, 2 weeks later, an opening. David called. My granddaughter, Lily, was asking for me. Would I come over for an hour, for her sake? His voice was cold, but I heard a flicker of guilt in it. Of course, I said. The visit was tense. Clara was frosty, and David disappeared into his study. I focused on Lily, playing with her in the living room. At one point, Clara went to the kitchen. It was my chance. The TV was on the wall, with a tangle of plugs and wires on the floor behind it. My little charger would be invisible. With my hands shaking, I knelt as if to tie my shoe, and I plugged the camera into the wall. It had a clear view of the whole room. The net was woven. Now, I just had to wait for the spider to walk into it. Section 5, The Spider's Confession. The days that followed were a new kind of agony. Every night, after another brief, tense visit to see Lily, I'd retrieve the memory card and watch hours of Clara's life. I watched her sip wine, talk on the phone, and scroll through her tablet. It was so boring, and my hopes started to fade. I felt like a fool, a paranoid old woman chasing ghosts. I almost gave up a dozen times. But then I'd remember the look on David's face, and I'd force myself to keep going. Then, on the 14th night, I found it. Clara was on the phone with her friend, Chloe. Oh, the old woman? Clara laughed, a sharp, mean sound. She's completely out of the picture. David barely even speaks to her. He's so consumed with guilt and embarrassment, he can't even look at her. My hands froze on the mouse. This was it. Honestly, Chloe, it worked better than I ever imagined, she whispered. He totally bought it. The tears, the "I'm so disappointed in your mother." And the best part? He feels so bad that he's practically throwing money at me. He doubled my personal allowance last week. She laughed again. He still has no idea about the other allowance either. The $5,000 a month I've been siphoning off. Between the forged transfer and his guilt money, I'll have more than enough to start my own business and leave him with his mommy issues. My whole body went stiff. It was all there. The fraud, the motive. But she wasn't done. The watch was just perfect, she bragged. So much sentimental value. It was so easy. During the commotion when guests were arriving, I just slipped into the study, took the watch, and tucked it into the lining of her ugly, old-fashioned handbag. The look on her face, priceless. A roar of white noise filled my ears. I had her. A full confession, with details only the person who did it could know. With trembling fingers, I saved the video file to 3 flash drives. I put one in my bank's safe deposit box and mailed another to my lawyer. I now had everything: the bank statements, the forged corporate records, and a crystal-clear video confession. My first thought was to send it all to David right away. But that would be her kind of victory, messy and chaotic. My victory had to be calm, deliberate, and public. Everyone who witnessed my humiliation needed to witness my vindication. I found out that David was hosting his company's big annual foundation gala in a month. At his estate. Attended by everyone. It was the perfect stage. Hashtag Section 6, The Reckoning. The night of the gala, I chose my outfit carefully, a simple, elegant navy blue dress. My power wouldn't come from my clothes, but from the truth I carried in my purse. When I walked into the ballroom, whispers followed me. People were surprised to see me. My family members who had turned their backs on me suddenly found the flower arrangements fascinating. Clara saw me, and her smile faltered for just a second. "Helen," she said, gliding over. "What a surprise. We weren't expecting you." "I'm still part of this family, Clara," I replied calmly. David saw me then, and his face went pale. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he whispered harshly. "Your foundation does good work, David." "I came to support it," I said, and walked right past him. After the main speeches, David stepped to the microphone. "Before we conclude," he said, "I'd like to open the floor, in case any of our family have any words they'd like to share." It was my cue. With a calmness I didn't feel, I walked to the stage. A hush fell over the room. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady and strong. "Most of you know me as David's mother. But for the past few months, I have been known as something else, a thief." A sharp intake of breath went through the crowd. A few months ago, in this house, I was accused of stealing a valuable family heirloom. I was humiliated and cast out. My own son believed it. I paused and looked right at David. His face was gray. I was told my motive was greed, that I needed money, despite the generous $5,000 monthly allowance my son was providing me. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "The funny thing about that allowance," I said, my voice ringing with clarity, "is that I never received it. These are my official bank statements for the last 2 years. As you can see, there are no such deposits." I placed the folder on the lectern. "But my son is a generous man." The money was being sent. $5,000, every month. I have the records from his finance department right here. I held up more papers. They show the money being diverted to a secret bank account, opened with a forged signature. "This is insane," Clara shouted from her table. "She's just a bitter old woman." I ignored her. For a long time, I couldn't understand the cruelty. But then, the truth revealed itself. I nodded to a technician I had hired, standing by a large projection screen. If everyone could please direct their attention to the screen. The lights dimmed. And then, the video played. Clara's face filled the screen, her voice filling the silent hall. Her smug confession, her bragging, her gleeful explanation of how she planted the watch. The silence in the room was absolute. I looked at Clara. All the color was gone from her face. She was a statue of pure terror. Finally, I looked at my son. David stared at the screen, his body rigid. As he listened, his expression changed from disbelief to a look of such profound devastation and guilt it was hard to watch. The video ended. The screen went black. I stepped back to the microphone. I didn't do this for revenge, I said softly. I did it for the truth. And to reclaim the one thing that money can't buy back, David. My honor. I placed the microphone on its stand. Without looking at anyone, I turned and walked off the stage. I walked through the stunned, silent crowd, my head held high. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage behind me. I was free. The conclusion is, in the aftermath, everything fell apart. David filed for divorce the next day. Clara, faced with irrefutable proof of fraud, had to repay every penny. The family was thrown into chaos, each person forced to look at their own weakness, their willingness to believe a lie. David came to my house and begged for my forgiveness. I listened. I told him that I loved him, a mother always will. But I did not tell him it was okay. Some things, once they are broken, can never be put back together in the same way. The absolute trust we once shared was gone. My victory wasn't seeing Clara ruined, or even in David's apology. My victory was in that silent walk out of the ballroom. It was the moment I took back my own story. I learned that your self-worth isn't something other people give you. It's something you forge yourself, in the fire of your own integrity. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal, and I had not only survived, but I had come out stronger, and finally, truly, at peace. If you love emotional stories with family drama, unexpected twists, and strong women, this is for you. New stories every day. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Thank you for watching and listening to my stories.
Remember to like, share, and subscribe to Voice of Grandma.